Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is David Lepofsky. I'm chair of the Ontarians with Disabilities Act Committee. With me is Patty Bregman, legal counsel for the ODA Committee with the Advocacy Resource Center for the Handicapped. Today begins the next round in the battle by 1.5 million people with disabilities for a barrier-free Ontario. We have just completed an election campaign where people with disabilities made history. We set out for the first time in this province to make our voices and our issues count in this election and in the democratic process. And we declare victory. We succeeded in our objective. In this election, for the first time across this province, people with disabilities flocked to all candidates' debates to raise their issues, contacted campaign offices to raise their issues, printed up and handed out leaflets right across this province by the thousands to raise their issues, and received a warm welcome and encouraging support wherever they went. Our issues matter to us, and they matter to everyone. And the election results, we say, show that we made our mark. In any challenge like this, one cannot have absolute success anywhere, but there are important measures of success wherever we look. The popular vote. 2 of the 3 parties declared as clear election platforms that they would enact a strong Ontarians with Disabilities Act within strict timelines to tear down the barriers that block people with disabilities from fully participating in our society, the Liberals and the New Democratic Party, and campaigned on that platform. We appreciate that support. So did the voters. Between the 2 of them, a clear majority of the voters in Ontario, through their popular vote, expressed their support for the 2 parties that made a strong Ontarians with Disabilities Act an election platform plank. That is a voice, a democratic voice, that any government must listen to. Moreover, if you look at specific results in specific ridings, the same message is clear. As you all know, over the past 4 years, we and people with disabilities across Ontario sought to get the legislature in this building to pass a strong and effective Ontarians with Disabilities Act. There were key players in that battle. Let's look at how they fared in this election. The lead critic for the Liberal Party, Dwight Duncan, faced a battle in his riding and was re-elected. The lead critic from the New Democratic Party, Frances Lankin, faced a battle in her riding and was re-elected. Both Dwight Duncan and Frances Lankin symbolized, through their views and their actions in the legislatures, a strong commitment to tear down the barriers people with disabilities face. Both will be back, and we will be counting on their support and that of their parties to move our agenda forward. In contrast, the 2 core members of the Conservative Party's team on this issue were Isabel Bassett and Derwin Shea. Isabel Bassett went down to defeat, and it is beyond question that her performance on the highest profile issue in her portfolio, her bungling of the Ontarians with Disabilities Act, had to play a factor in her defeat. As well, her parliamentary assistant, Derwin Shea, was her lieutenant in last summer's public, or allegedly public but not really public, consultation on the Disability Act issue. Derwin Shea did not even stand for re-election, and his riding went Liberal. The message is clear. The candidates who were the strongest proponents of a strong Ontarians with Disabilities Act were re-elected, and undoubtedly their contribution to this effort played a role in their re-election. And the candidate who had the lead role in carrying this issue for the government in the past 2 years went down to a resounding defeat. Where do we go from here? Our message is a clear one. From this election, people with disabilities emerge stronger than ever. We have shown that we can make our mark. We can make our mark in all candidates' debates. We can make our mark at street corners and in seniors' homes and in other facilities and other places where we can get our message out. You're going to see a lot more of that. We can make our mark in the press. If you look at the last 3 or 4 days before the election itself, just as an example, you will see coverage that we received on radio, television, and newspapers from North Bay to London to St. Catharines to Toronto, and Lord knows that's only the emails that I've gotten so far. And that's only the last couple of days of the election. We even made our mark on the internet. Between putting out an action tip of the day virtually every day to educate people with disabilities and their supporters on action, to maintaining a volunteer website that had an unprecedented almost 6,000 hits during May, several hundred just in the past few days alone, reveals the extent to which our message is getting out there. But we still got a lot to do. And today we begin the next round of that campaign. What's our goal? Our goal remains the same. We want a barrier-free Ontario for all people with disabilities, and we need a strong and effective Ontarians with Disabilities Act to achieve that goal. What have we got going for us? Well, first, we still have in our hands and fully intend to put forward the promise that Mike Harris made to us in writing 4 years ago and still unfulfilled. He promised that he would enact the Ontarians with Disabilities Act in his first term. He didn't. But he claims he's going to keep all his promises, and we're going to hold him to that. To that end, the people of Ontario have given Mike Harris a second chance to keep that promise, and we are offering to work together with him to develop it, to develop the legislation that he promised he would enact. As well, we have an outstanding commitment, still unmet, from Mike Harris from 4 years ago, that he would personally work together with us to develop the law that we were promised and never got. In 4 years in office, he never once met with us. He made the promise, and we want it kept. To that end, we've written to him just in the past day and a half to urge an immediate meeting with him, or at least as soon as possible, to get this back on track and to work together with him in a cooperative way. We also have going for us the fact that the Premier, after the election, both on election night and the next day in North Bay, proclaimed, in effect, a new approach to his style of governing. The Premier indicated that he was going to reach out to those who had not been included in the past. He was going to reach out to those who he had previously seen as those on the other side, to those who had not been included in the governing process and in the process of developing and implementing his policies. What better example or opportunity is there for the Premier to reach out than to people with disabilities whom he had explicitly promised to work with 4 years ago and yet refused to meet for the entirety of his first mandate? It's our view that the clearest, surest, most immediate test of whether the Premier's statements after the election about reaching out and being cooperative was a real new approach or just rhetoric is whether he will take us up on our offer to meet with him as soon as possible to kickstart the process of developing and enacting a strong Ontarians with Disabilities Act. As well, we have going for us the commitment of the Premier, or at least the position of the Premier in the last election campaign, that Ontario's economy is strong, that our growth is better than anywhere else in Canada, that we are doing great. What better time would there be in the province of Ontario to reach out to people with disabilities and to pass a strong and effective Ontarians with Disabilities Act? When will we be in a better position to tear down the barriers that block us, 1.5 million of us, from full participation in jobs, healthcare, education, and the many other opportunities that others cherish and value as much as we. There could be no better time. So in conclusion, we today kick off a new round in our campaign for a Strong Ontarians with Disabilities Act. We have written the Premier to call for an urgent meeting to get this process started. We will be writing both opposition leaders to thank them for their commitment and support during the campaign, and to urge them to keep this issue a priority, and indeed to make it a priority when the legislature resumes. We are reaching out to our membership at the grassroots right across Ontario. We're organized in 17 regions and plan to grow even further, to get their ideas and their actions planned, to get our message out to the public, to the media, and to the newly elected politicians, so that the strong consensus that we know the public has in support of a strong new barrier-free law will be translated into a political reality, and soon. If there are any questions, we're happy to take them. My only request is tell me who you are, if you know.
My name's Caroline Jevern. I'm with CFMT Television. What makes you think that this time Mike Harris is going to listen to you? I mean, despite the fact that Isabel Bassett and company were toppled, he didn't even allude to the disabled in his blueprint. So what makes you actually think that he's going to meet with you this time?
The best answer is there's a difference between what one would like and what one will get, and that what you get from what one would like, or the way you get to what one would like, is by exactly what we're going to do. What is going to put this issue forward is the strong showing of support from people with disabilities across the province in the last election, which is unprecedented. The flood of email I've gotten since the election last Thursday, which reveals that the people who've been active on this issue aren't tired, they're not exhausted, they're not giving up, they are more ready than ever to battle on. The fact that this issue got more attention in this election than disabilities issues have ever gotten in an Ontario election before. The fact that the popular vote is exactly as I said. The fact that in terms of the turnout, the message to any politician from Isabel Bassett's defeat is pretty clear. And finally, the Premier said he's going to keep his word. He didn't the first time around. He's been given a second chance. He will have no excuse for not keeping his word. He had no excuse, we think, last time, but he certainly has no excuse this time. And we're going to be more active than ever. We started out 4.5 years ago as 20 people in a room down the hall here. We've grown into 17 regions, lots of people involved, and lots more calling and wanting to get involved. During this election alone, you'd be amazed at how many people who had no involvement in politics before, no involvement in the Ontarians with Disabilities Act Committee before, no involvement in disability issues before, called us, contacted us, got our materials, went out, organized, handed out leaflets, went to all candidates' debates, raised issues, made this an issue. This is unprecedented, and it's a strong message that no politician can ignore.
But he clearly said that his priority is to cut taxes, and isn't that going to in some way overshadow your priority?
No, it shouldn't. Let's put it this way, it shouldn't. I can't speak for what Mike Harris is going to do. I can only speak for what we would like and will urge Mike Harris to do, and what he promised to do. And we can only draw upon his statements after the election. Cutting taxes is for the government to decide on, and that's their platform. Our issue is about removing barriers, both in the public sector and in the private sector, and preventing new ones from being created. And it's not that you can only do one or the other. In fact, we've never been told, even by this government, that you can, if you cut taxes, you can't do a Strong Ontarians with Disabilities Act. They've never said that, and certainly we've never said that.
Do you really believe that Isabel Bassett lost her riding over disabilities? I mean, it's a city riding with a lot of issues around schools, around hospitals.
Your question presupposes that I said that was the only reason she lost. I certainly we've never claimed that, and I don't claim that. Rather, we say that it had to play a role. And we know it had to play a role because it came up in all candidates' debates, at the all candidates debate, one of the ones that we were at, which shockingly in the minister's own riding, the Minister for Disability Issues had been scheduled for an inaccessible schoolhouse. When this issue was raised, it received a thunderous applause from everybody in the room, including the clear partisans from Ms. Bassett's own team. The reality is that if you look at Ms. Bassett's record over the past 2 years and the issues on which she was on the floor questioned in the House, there is no issue that is higher profile than this. And frankly, I have to tell you that when we got contacted by individuals with disabilities or people without disabilities who themselves wanted to be active, we are nonpartisan. We, as a coalition, didn't target any politician. But we sure got feedback of individuals who sure wanted to concentrate their efforts in her riding. And every vote counts, and every vote counted. And the only way one could factor this issue out of it is if you were to assume that, or if one, not you, but if one were to assume that that literally her highest profile issue on which she and her government were widely criticized and condemned across the province wouldn't play a role. And it's hard to believe that would be the case.
Al Vincent from CFRB. I guess the most recent indication that was not a particularly clear one where the government is headed on this was in the throne speech. There was a line, something to the effect that rather than reintroducing the bill that you detested, not that they're winning, obviously, in the throne speech, rather than do that, there would be consultation before they brought in another bill. Have you had any feelers for consultation?
Well, they haven't approached us since then, and perhaps this is a helpful addition to the question I was asked earlier about, what makes you think they're going to do it. The other thing you should be aware of is that this was raised at all candidates debates all over the province. And it was raised by grassroots folks, some who are involved with us and some who've just heard about the issue. And Tory candidate after Tory candidate got up and after reading the usual spiel that they were getting from headquarters, made a point of saying, that in one way or other that they messed it up the first time, they've got to do a strengthened bill the next time. Even Isabel Bassett, on behalf of her government during the campaign, said that the new bill would be strengthened. That came from, candidates in various parts of the province, and that's who's forming the new caucus that's going to itself form the government. So all of that works together. We have not heard back from the government on what kind of consultations it plans, because that throne speech took place, as you know, mere days before the election itself was called.
And to know our two search why do you think the government didn't produce the bill that you were expecting in the first term of office?
That is the most reasonable question that I am always asked, and that I'm in exactly the last position to answer. It was, it would have been great to ask the Premier that, but he didn't talk to us for 4 years. For 3 years, the government did nothing and kept saying, we'll keep our promise, like a sort of a repeated mantra. And then at the end, they introduced a bill, as you know, that was 3 pages long, did nothing, didn't require a single barrier to be removed anywhere, widely condemned everywhere. They let it die, and they admitted themselves in their throne speech that they had to do better. Surely we agree. I suspect that the Harris government did not see this as something which was either important to them in their first term, or for which there could be much of a public or political response. I think the last election has shown how much we are able to get our message out and how much the public agrees with us. Moreover, again, the government didn't say anything to us about this, but some journalists speculated in the absence of any word from the government that when the Tories took power, the economy was not in as good shape as it could be. Well, they don't have that excuse anymore, and in fact they claim that they were responsible for getting it to where it is now, and that they're going to make things even better. So even if that were their excuse, and again, we don't know because they haven't told us, then it doesn't exist anymore. But I would encourage you to ask the Premier that question, because he's in a better position than we are to explain why he didn't do it.
David, it's Ainsley from CBC Radio. How much was Isabel Bassett, I guess, a barrier to getting the ODA that you'd hoped for? Would it be easier dealing with someone else?
Well, we made it clear during the last government that it was obvious to everybody that the Harris government is a very centralized government and the shots were being called by the Premier. And it was pretty clear to us that Ms. Bassett was not given much of a mandate to do very much. On the other hand, she's responsible for what she stood up and introduced, and she is responsible for what she claimed she was proud of, which was a bill that didn't require a single barrier to be removed anyway. We are hoping that the Premier will appoint a strong minister, a minister in which the Premier can repose some confidence and give some scope to, so that this can be done right. But our message throughout has been and remains that this is really the kind of legislation that cuts across so many ministries that it's only going to be effective if there is strong leadership from the Premier. And it is for that reason that we were not contented to just be sloughed off on a minister, much less a minister that had no mandate. It does require us to sit down with the Premier immediately. We were caught in this catch-22 because in the early years of the last mandate, in fact, through much of the last mandate, you'd write the Premier and he either wouldn't answer, he'd say, go talk to the minister, and then you go talk to the minister, and it was clear the minister either wouldn't talk to you for most of the mandate, or if they talked to you, all they'd do is they'd say thank you for your views, and it was clear they had no mandate to do anything without calling the Premier and getting permission. So if the government is going to remain a very Harris centralized government, then one might say whoever the next minister is won't matter. But we, I think, would like a minister who is strong and committed to this issue, and who will be in a position to persuade their cabinet colleagues and their caucus colleagues. But as well, we've got to be able to work directly with the Premier. After all, when he wrote his promise to us in 1995, he said in the first person that I, meaning he, wanted to work together with us. We want to take him up on that. Any other questions? I think you're going to, just to conclude, I think you're going to see that this issue is going to remain. It was the lead issue in response to the throne speech. It is the first issue off the mark in response to the election. From what we're seeing and hearing across the province, people with disabilities are geared up and ready to forge ahead on this. And with the Premier's stated commitment to take a fresh approach in the face of a strong economy towards cooperation with everyone, and his statement that he will do what he said he would do, we're going to hold him to it. Thank you all very much.